Goon Swarm is not a threat.
Good luck with your all's dumb nullsec war snuffed out #1. Anunnaki Keepstar is next, and then come on.
There, then you were just going to fucking magically jump into EVE Online in a system, and it was just going to load, and nobody was going to call you fucking stupid later?
There's an Eagle fleet that has dive bombed a Megathron fleet. This is the bravest shit I have ever seen in my life.
The best possible shot to do something to the Imperium, and you fucked it up.
I talked a lot of shit over the last couple months. It's time to fucking eat some. And I showed up here to eat shit. Like,
the reason that this keeps started and get contested, and I cannot make this up, is because of tie-dye.
Guess where goons are going to live after this war is over?
Current plan is 319, I believe, right?
Hell.
Hi, sick.
I can tell you very clearly, our Diplos didn't even fucking care. So, like,
Good evening. Another Sunday, another Untethered. People at CCP, some of whom are with us, have been deep in the mines, figuring out how to make it so that when you're deep in your mines, you can be a little bit happier than some of you are currently. We've got a couple of CCP with us today, as well as our regulars, Redline and Luke. We've got CCP Convict. How are you today?
I'm very good. Thank you for having me on the show.
Thank you for being here. And we have the star of the mining channel in the official EVE Discord, CCP Okami, with us today as well. How are you doing?
Hey, I'm doing well, thank you. Thanks for having me here as well.
Excellent, thank you. Thank you for being here with us. A lot of people have been, from various places in EVE, have been absolutely sobbing and on their knees, desperate to simultaneously make more money and pay less money for their ships in EVE Online across a huge variety of different hulls. And loads of people have been, well, I would go as far to say hundreds or potentially thousands of people have been absolutely delighted to see what I think is a very nice dev blog that's kind of like a bit more detailed and a bit more personal than we normally get to see from CCP. For anybody who hasn't seen it, Okami here managed to publish a dev blog acknowledging, I would say, some quite specific aspects of where people feel some pain points with mining at the moment. How long, Okami, have you been kind of feeling that you wanted to have a real run at the mining economy in EVE?
Yeah, that's a great question. To be honest, I think it really just kicked off in the last few months when we took a full swing at turning all of Equinox on, and we started seeing the challenges with the mining economy and the MPI start to kind of skyrocket. As always, we're hoping things are going to work out and they're okay, and we've got to watch and see where things go. But as things didn't kind of level out how we hoped, we really started to have to rethink about what we wanted to do. So I'd say really the last 2 to 3 months here we've been just monitoring, and I think the last month and a half is when things, I've got a really keen interest in diving deep into this.
Wonderful, excellent. Well, I'll tell you what, before we go into some kind of specifics from there, you're relatively new to CCP. I mean, you told me before we started that it's been almost dead on a year since you joined. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. It's been basically a year on the nose.
Marvelous. Let's briefly find out a little bit about you then. I mean, what kind of other games have you enjoyed before you've come to work on EVE Online?
That's always a hard question to answer as a game designer. I feel like I pretty much play everything that's out there that people are talking about as much as possible. It's a huge part of my just job, my life, and my hobby and my passion is so I juggle a lot of games. I'm playing Monster Hunter Wilds right now. I'm sure a lot of people are. I love RPGs. I love narrative games. I love stuff like Baldur's Gate, the old games and the new games. Yeah, it's a really hard one to go into. I can just like open up my Steam library and go through everything.
Tell you what, Convict. You've been at CCP for some years now. When you're checking out future hires, do you make sure that they like good games, like Okami has illustrated that he likes? You make sure that there's no rubbish games on their lists that would stop you from hiring them?
No, I don't think we're that judicious about like scrutinizing people's sort of gameplay records. It's not like, hey, send us a screenshot of your Steam library just to make sure that you check out. But Okami is right. There are staple games that everyone's playing, it seems, at any given time, and then everyone's got like their like little sort of quiet niche games that they play off in the corner by themselves, which is means something personally to them. But obviously, a interest in a diverse variety of games. But obviously, CCP Okami approaches games probably a lot differently than I do. Seeing as how he's a game designer, he probably sees it like a matrix waterfall, whereas I just see what's on the screen. I'm a simple guy.
You know what? It's like the interesting part about being a game designer. I think doing it for this long too is always trying to not do that, to like find enjoyment in games and not just try to like analyze and break it apart. So always trying to look at like what trends are and like what's kind of happening out there, but also like trying to just let go of that and find the joy in it.
I tell you what, that's an interesting sort of point. So let's imagine. And we'll just preface this by saying this is not something that's going to happen. But if you could pick a mechanic from a non-MMO that would be neat to put into Eve, does anything come to mind from another game that would be cool to have?
I know we've taken a light crack at it, but we need more fishing. We need fishing, hands down. I love fishing mini games, so a little more fishing. We tried with the deep flow rifts, and this is some light fishing there, but I think we could go a little further.
Marvelous. And then obviously the following mechanics to prepare the fish and cook them afterwards, obviously, as well.
Exactly. Get some nice cooking animations and stuff like Monster Hunter would be great.
Oh wow, you mean fishing for actual fish? I thought you meant like maybe fishing for space junk or something grim dark, fitting in. But we're just going right down to the point. It's to fish. I'm cool.
Yeah, listen, we've already got video adverts in the game for the seafood from certain Caldari planets.
Metagu sushi.
So
where are they getting the fish from?
The lore is already there to get cracking. There's the open portion of the game.
You make a fair point. You make a fair point.
So, mining rocks. Obviously, it's the single most fun activity in Eve is sitting on a rock and cycling a laser or some mining drones on it. Everybody in the game can't get enough of it, and they wish there was a lot more of it.
Just to interrupt real quick, Phantomite's views do not represent the views of the New Eden Post, just so you know. We gotta.
Well, look at this outfit. Like, we can tell we have a real mining fan here, right? There's a lot of mining.
I can't believe we just glazed past the outfit. Like, we're just gonna continue on with the show while Phantomite is in full mining garb. This dude is in the mines right now with everyone else. It's crazy.
Well, I really hope that in a show like this we can really connect with the people who want to know what's going on. And everybody out there who has 50 Hulk ults isn't going to take me seriously if I don't look like I'm ready for it.
That's a fair point.
Yeah. Anyway. There are different levels at which people mine in this game. There are people who are mining in a venture, and there are people who are multi-boxing exhumers with a bunch of links and support craft as well. How on earth do you even begin to try and approach building a system that has some useful gameplay for all of these people and the sizes in between?
That's a great question. A little bit of hope and a little bit of prayer sometimes. It's a really tricky one, Eve is a sandbox. You guys know this. And a part of sandbox design is both trying to do things purposefully and also letting go sometimes. And so sometimes, a conversation I'm led to often is like, well, you guys released a thing and you said it'd be this. And often my response to that is like, not what it intended to be, but what it does. And so with a lot of these things, I think we set out with intentions, with purpose. We have wonderful resources internally, people who have done tons and tons and tons of mining, and we can speak to. We have the CSM, and so it's using all of these resources to make sure we consider everything the best we can, and then spreadsheets, and then just hope in the sandbox and trust in the simulation and the simulated economy of Eve, and that's how she goes.
Very interesting. Yeah, it's. I would imagine that there must be, a point at which you just say, "Sorry, my guy. Sorry, Mr. Player. You're not going to get everything you want, but there is going to be something good for you here." A number of people have been talking about in questions and in the thread that you made on the Discord. They've been asking questions around, am I going to get my 2017 Rorqual era mining back? Would I be right in assuming that, what you're hoping to do with the game isn't just reverse and go back to the mechanics of before, but you're looking to build on what we've got already? Is there anything you want to avoid?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. So the first thing is I wasn't at CCP for this era, and there's a lot of information I'm downloading into my brain from people who were there around how we perceived it as a company and as a studio. I think it's interesting because I hear different conversations online on Reddit and Discord around oh, I missed that time, it was great, what was wrong with that? And then other people defending the changes that have happened afterwards. I think ultimately in a game like Eve, when we talk about that era, there are probably a number of reasons why this happened beyond just the Rorqual itself, but effectively it felt like a lot of the tension and a lot of the work and a lot of the effort to get to a place where you could build up to something bigger was just kind of removed, and I think that's one thing we want to avoid. So I'm constantly looking to strike this balance between finding the thing that people want to do in Eve, the thing that they're there for the most, like getting in a spaceship and shooting other people or whatever it is, and looking for the right balance of but you've got to do this other stuff to get to that, right? You've got to work up to that thing that you want to do. And so, yeah, we don't want to go back to that era. I think we're moving forward. Eve has new systems in place now, right? The whole subsystem is different now. There is new content. The way ore is distributed through the universe is totally different. So there's no going back. There's only going forward. But everybody has a point, right? I think Rorquals are a very cool ship, and a lot of people want to get back into them. I think they have a very unique role and serve a unique purpose in the game, and it's just the content is missing, and the reason to use them is missing. And so yeah, we want to find a way to get people back in space and using them in a more balanced and sort of meaningful way.
We have in the chat. I've just queued up several things in my mind here, so we'll go through some of them in a sec. First of all, to anyone watching, please do very much feel free to ask questions in the chat. We are watching. We may not be able to answer everything, ask everything that is in there, but by all means put things in there because there's some interesting stuff in there already. You talk about. We mentioned Rorquals, we touch upon Rorquals, and we've got a very interesting contrast in chat. We have Nat3S, or Nates, saying, yeah, it took years to skill into Rorks. Without them, the game has lost that aspirational journey for miners. Can skill into Exhumers much quicker, feels less MMO-y. But then, immediately after that, we've got someone saying, buff solo mining, please. Mm. And these are two very different scales here. We've got Rorquals, which... be it people on the field or people waiting to bridge in and save you, is very much a big team mining thing. And we've got somebody asking for solo mining buffs as well. The two complete different ends of the scale within seconds of each other in the chat.
Yeah, it's Eve is a game that needs to support all of these things, and it doesn't always support all of these things. I think, earlier when you asked like how do we design for this stuff, and I talked a little bit about that. The opposite end of it is, even if we are meaningful in the way that we approach trying to make this as balanced as possible for everybody, it doesn't always work for everybody. And sometimes when we fix a problem, we make another problem. And that's just a little bit of working in a systemic MMO like Eve, and a game that's been around for this long too. So both people are right, and I think both things have value, and it's just a matter of which place do we look at first, and which problem do we solve first. Not whether we should do both or either. And it's just which order and how it happens. So solo miners, I solo mine. I like doing everything as least efficiently as possible, because I like to feel what the game feels like at that pace, personally. And so yeah, I think there could be more better stuff there for people like that too. But then there's people who've worked very hard to get into Rorquals and want to do cool stuff with that, with the groups they're in as well. And so absolutely.
Would it be fair to say that what you're saying there is you want there to be viable reasons that people would put Rorquals on the field again?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. I've got a very specific, one of our very specific questions that was submitted via the form that Redline had previously posted. It's a very short and simple one, and I know that the answer isn't necessarily a yes or no. It says, will we ever see a return to pre-scarcity sized rocks and belts?
So here's my short answer is, I don't know what the exact sizes of those belts were because I wasn't here. I've seen the statistics and the data for the output of all of that. So the reality is, I don't know specifically. However, we are looking at creating bigger rocks for Rorquals. That you'll see a lot of those in the update coming out in March. There's much bigger rocks, for one. Will we see bigger beyond that? It's possible. I think I don't like to take anything off the table here, so no promises. But if bigger rocks is the thing that we need, then sure. But I'd also say, if at the point where we have these bigger rocks and Rorquals still aren't out there, there's probably a different problem that we need to solve, either in how the Rorqual operates or capital mining in general, and that's probably where we'd put our attention to, instead of just saying, "Oh, I'll just keep making them bigger until Rorquals get out there."
I feel like, I'll preface this by saying that this is a my opinion kind of thing. But obviously, however people earn their money in this game, be it mining, be it some form of ratting. In the past, I've run a lot of numbered dead space sites as my income. It's obviously human nature to essentially, but maybe in more cloaked words, ask CCP for, hey, can you buff my thing and make it safer for me to do it? And I know that that's not really an appropriate question to ask. But some people right now a lot of people feel that it's just not worth it. And it's no one cause for that. It's not just that they're seeing a lot of small rocks that they have to split their attention on. It's not just because space is dangerous and people come to kill them. How do you feel about the idea that people always need to be at an acceptable level of risk? I know it's kind of a question that only has one answer, but I think it's the kind of thing that people like to hear from people with this kind of influence on the game.
Yeah, I mean, that's part of Eve, right? I think is risk. So I think with especially greater means of production and value and things like this, that comes risk as well. It's pretty much fundamental and core to what Eve is.
Mm-hmm. Let's have a look. I'm looking at some more of these questions that were asked. I've got another very, very specific one here. Sure. It says, how will these changes help people porpoise mining? The value of rocks will go down due to mass rorqual mining, but porpoise miners will be left mining the same stuff. I like the changes, but it will kill... It's gone off the end. It will kill nullsec unless...
I got you.
Redline, maybe you can transcribe that for me. It's gone off the edge of the
I got you,
form.
friend. Let me flip it out real quick.
You're going to read it out for me?
I'll read it out for you. All right, I like the changes, but it will kill porpoise mining in nullsec unless there are smaller sites with more valuable ore. Porpoise mining is already worse than ratting, fully AFK and a vexer in terms of ISK per hour and actions per minute. That is a
couple of interesting ones in there. Yeah, it's very, very specific. So like I said earlier, when you asked how do we do this, the one answer I have is like, we don't fully know what the impact is going to be yet. So let's get out there and let's see what happens first, and then measure that. And maybe we have fully messed up porpoise mining, and that sucks. That's a thing that we'll look at and we'll fix, right? I think it's fix one problem, there's another one, and we just keep iterating on this thing. The other sort of interesting one in there is the value of ISK per hour, and this is another topic, right? And this has come up, Luke, with the CSM a few times here as well. In that right now in nullsec, it is much more valuable to be ratting than mining, and we totally know that. That in itself probably has driven more people into ratting than mining, and been a part of the compound issue that we're seeing with the MPI and less minerals being generated. So the ask here really is like, it's not even just porpoise mining, it's just making sure that mining in general is a viable profession in nullsec that can generate wealth. No matter what chips you're using, I think is the thing that we want to make sure we're doing, and that there is a good sort of like level of equity between activities of mining and ratting. So absolutely, I hear you. We care, and we're gonna just keep nudging this thing until we get it right. That's what I can say.
I sense something interesting else in that question there. That question, they mentioned that it's not competitive with Ishtar ratting on APM as well, as in you interacting with it. Now, as a elite hardcore PvPer, rather than as a personal empire builder, it does strike me that it feels to me, in my opinion, I'll just quickly throw it out there, it's definitely a personal opinion, that there's a lot of entitlement in this question to forms of money making that require you to not interact very much with your game client. Do you think that there could also be, if we're making this competitive on APM, do you think that there should be more APM on these tasks like Ishtar ratting?
That is a great question. I can give you my personal answer, my opinion, and then I don't know if we have an official opinion.
Convict, get that red button ready, okay?
Yeah, get the red button.
I just told you that's not why I'm here. So go nuts. He's the director. He can say whatever he wants. He can wave his hand and say, "I unclassify this," right? Like that's his prerogative if he wants to do
it. Yeah, I mean, we have lots of internal chats about this, and like, what is good, what is healthy, what be like. We talk a lot about player behaviors, like what are the player patterns and things that people are doing, and which ones are good for Eve and which ones aren't good for Eve. What's enjoyable? Like, is it cool to just put Netflix on and watch some stuff and do some ratting? Like, yeah, maybe that's pretty chill. But like when you ask me this question about like risk, and APM comes up, which really comes into like effort, in terms of like your physical human effort. And so we do have to look at those things and be like, hey, there's this thing over here that somebody's doing that like requires a ton of effort, but like, and it's pretty risky, but like it doesn't really do as well as this thing where somebody can just like watch a show and like kind of zone out and just spin around some stuff. So yeah, I mean, I personally, I feel like there's something there. And I'm not promising anything here. I'm not going to say I'm going to break your Ishtar ratting or anything like that. But I do think yeah, I mean, maybe I am. I don't know. We'll see.
No.
But yeah, I mean, I have to consider this in the like sort of holistic perspective of Eve and all the things people are doing. Is this thing fair and equitable to what everyone else is doing? And there's a few activities that aren't. So that's what I think. Do I think it needs some attention? Do I think it needs a high APM? Probably not. But maybe there's a change that is needed either to the risk or effort for value at some point in time.
I want to just jump in here real quick because I have a question just about APM and I don't want to forget it. So, and it was funny because in chat someone mentioned botting, and that's one of the problems with any kind of changes to APM is that it always has an impact on botting. So how do you look at changes that you're making to make sure that it doesn't make it so an activity is more likely to be performed by bots than actual players? Like, where's the APM that becomes tedious, I guess?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, as I mentioned earlier, when we're talking about how do we design a thing, we have a lot of inputs. And I think we rely on vetting our designs with our internal folks like the Convict. We rely on vetting them with folks like Luke on the CSM. It's really hard to, it's a difficult balance when you're trying to be aspirational and designing something to always have these sort of like the baggage on your shoulder, like holding you down, which is like, but there's bots, right? But this would be so fun, but there's bots. And it's there's always the sort of like seesaw balance there. So how do we do it? I don't think there's like a perfect process other than sort of hammering it out in conversation, trying to validate it with as many people as we can, and just making sure you're thinking about it. And of course, like always, it's not perfect. It's never perfect. And if there's problems that come up, then it's just fix them at some point.
I think there's a bit of a kind of elephant in the room when it comes to comparing, just boiling it down to comparing APMs for things, in that a lot of players' chosen income methods are things that they kind of want to do without really paying a lot of without paying a lot of attention. Or you could read it as things that they can scale because you don't need to pay huge amounts of attention, so I can do 10 of them, rather than just one or two. Do you think that there's any hope for it just increasing the APM of these activities doesn't make it more fun for people? Do you think that there's any chance of in the future sometime creating an actual game for these people to play that makes them money rather than just something they do on the side with mining or ratting? Perhaps something that's fun to do but requires enough of their attention and input that they would only use one or two characters, but the income is competitive. Any ideas for how we can accomplish that one day in the future?
Yeah, I mean, so again, this is we're in highly speculative territory, and I'm just shooting the shit here. But we have conversations about this stuff in design all the time. I see it in the community, and I see like arguments on both sides where people are like, I call it active gameplay, like something where you have to think and click and like think about what you're doing to have some level of skill and mastery, versus like passive gameplay where you're like, I target the thing and I just sit on it and I wait and I watch my show, or I do something else. I play another game on the side and then I click the next thing. And I would like there to be active gameplay for a lot of things. And I think there's arguments internally. There are other designers who are like, no, I don't think we should do that. I wouldn't say we've landed on anything yet. So this is just a conversation right here. I like hearing from people too, by the way. So like if you guys are like, oh man, like I would love that. Like tell me about it. I'd love to hear that. So there's also, the idea of low effort activity as well. So you could be watching TV and playing something on your phone, right? Like a lot of people do that. And these games can tend to still get you into some sort of a flow state where you're like thinking a little bit and like things feel good and you put a little bit of effort in and you're kind of like the difficulties going up and down and up and down and up and down. That's the thing we think about in game design. And it's just enough for you to like need a little bit of thought and skill, but you can still kind of like watch your show. Right.
This is kind of like something I was talking to you about the other day, actually, when we were talking about people who use WebAlts to move freighters around. So ignore the multi-boxing aspect for a moment, but you can undock your freighter and hit the autopilot button and go away from the computer. And assuming all goes well, it'll be at its destination by the time you come back. Or you can, it'll be less efficient though, because it's going to be landing 15 k's away from each gate, and a freighter takes a long time to slow boat. Or if you're at the computer, you can just keep telling it to warp to 0 and jump while you watch Netflix or something like that. Or if you're willing to invest the extra time into it, you can have your WebAlt standing by, do your duel, sling the freighter to the first gate, warp the alt there, wait for the timer, jump through, web it on the other side. So you're rewarded with greater efficiency for the extra effort you put in. Now, the reason I say ignore the multi-boxing aspect of that, because I know the multi-boxing thing is what enables that. But any kind of gameplay where the more engaged and the more invested you are and the more attention you give it, there is some kind of reward, whether that be efficiency or something else derived from it, and then it scales. So you can choose how much effort I want to put in, whether that's autopilot and go AFK completely, or sit there and manage every single jump and the entire procession from one end to the other and get there in a fraction of the time.
Yeah, to jump on that one for a second and to change the topic from mining for a moment, like I want there to be better gameplay around hauling. Like I think there's something that can be pretty passive. Like there are ways of making it a little bit more active, but it requires a pretty like significant setup and amount of effort. But like that's ripe for something, an activity. Like there are games called Space Trucker and stuff like that. If you haven't seen it, look on Steam. It's pretty fun. So fun. Like Space Trucker and Eve, I don't know, maybe. But yeah, it's looking at things like these. And I think on the other hand, like there are people who just want to like chill out and just spin around a rock and like watch Netflix. And that's like I don't think we shouldn't support that either. If people are like enjoying that, I think we just if we're gonna explore the alternative path, like both have to be viable. For the people who are asking about like solo play, like that's probably the thing that solo players are more interested in, and maybe something that could support solo play better as well.
I feel like earlier you asked you asked if anybody had suggestions that you wanted to hear them. So I'm going to take this opportunity as being in the same room with you to tell you an idea that I heard this past weekend on a different show, but essentially make fighters for Rorquals. But the fighters mine, so they're like little mining barges that you put out. Okay. So you can put those out and you can mine, just have them go around rocks and not do anything with it. Watch your Netflix or whatever, but you're not going to get as much. Or the F1, F2, and F3 of these little mining fighters would be boosts to your mining, where if you're pressing them actively, you get more. You get more for your time, basically. That supports both playstyles. What do you think?
Absolutely. I like it. And you know what? Like, I'll be real with you. Like, everybody who gives me an idea, I write it down and I think about it. So I just wrote that down and I'm going to think about it. Amazing. Not every idea is going to make it in. Not every idea is a good idea. But every idea makes me think and may trigger something interesting. So I love it. I think there's something pretty cool there.
While we're on the subject of, alternate styles of gameplay around mining. How do you feel about the concept of gun mining, in that there is a combat source of minerals as well as a direct mining source of minerals? Do you think that could factor into the future of mineral pricing?
So you're like blowing rocks up, shooting them down?
Not directly.
You might have to fill CCP Okami in about how things used to work in drones.
He means in certain regions. Drones was a good example of this. You would destroy the rats, then you would salvage them and reprocess everything from those rats.
Yeah.
Well,
so
I told them. Additionally to that, we do have very rarely seen legacy mechanics in the game with NPC haulers that can that drop minerals. Now, typically, somebody might know for sure, because I've rarely done it because there's little reason to. But there are NPC mining fleets out there that will bring a full combat fleet of Logi, DPS, and Tackle, and E-War, and that whole fleet will come and start eating you. But you may be able to get something of value out of the hauler that you attack that summoned them. Now, typically, you kind of have to have a small fleet of guys to take that on in combat ships, not in mining ships.
Mm-hmm.
But these mechanics already exist in the game to potentially have combat sources of materials. And what's more, this requires that you be in ships that are very suited for PvP rather than PvE directly.
Yep.
So this gets combat-ready ships into PvE rather than just PvE optimized ships into space that obviously have to run if there's a PvP situation. Do you think we could see some kind of expansion of that?
I think it's interesting and totally on the table. Like I think it was my last comment which talked about I think it was mining gameplay in the dev blog here, and this is the kind of stuff that we're talking about. Is like what doesn't exist right now, or what may sort of like slightly exist that could support the concept of like extracting minerals from the game in different places, and like this could be viable. This along with like salvaging, right? Like salvaging is kind of a weird place right now. It's okay when you're starting out. I think it's not bad. Is the fantasy of salvaging great? I don't know. Could we take that a little bit further too, and apply that to different ships and different ship types, different fantasies, different gameplay? So yeah, I think it's totally on the table, and in an effort to maybe not even like disrupt mining as it is in the way that people like it and enjoy it right now, and do that, we may even look for other ways of like saying like, okay, well, like what if you got ore from over here in a completely different way? And I think that's what you're talking about, which is cool and lines up with that sort of idea.
So I very much feel like there's opportunities in the game for people to be PvP ready while PvEing, which is different to just Ishtar ratting, which obviously encourages you to min-max your ships for PvE.
Yep.
I feel like that's kind of gives a paradigm where the PvEer always has to run. They always have to run because they are not combat ready. Of course they have to run. You know, I think it would be neat to see money earning situations in the game that allow you to be PvP ready. There's a lot of chat. There's a lot of people in chat looking for. A lot of people in the chat would love it if you could tell us all of the stats from the future patch right now. If you could reel off all of the changes exactly as they will be.
Let's go.
What kind of things do you hope you can put into this patch?
Well, let's dig into some specifics. Where do we want to start? I have some stats. I'm also going to caveat that like this is last week. We're still doing some like tweaking and balancing and stuff. So I might say some things and they might be like a little bit different when we release the patch notes. So don't eat me if they change a little. But we can dig into stuff. I talked a little bit about the general or in all of the sites. I think I've put that in Discord. I'm going to bring up my remember everything that I said in my pinned message here. So we'll start there. If you haven't seen it in Discord, go check it out. I have a pinned message in the CCP Okami mining, Equinox mining balance, I think is the thing. And I'm trying to keep track of all these things there. So whatever I say here, I'll put there also if there's new information. But I have to scroll up a lot. So we're looking at people have been asking about the M3 of the T3 sites. So I'll start with that one. If you haven't seen the answer, we're looking at 12 to 25 million M3 in range for those sites. So they're
For the
significantly
sites, not
larger.
individual rocks.
That's right, not individual rocks.
I mean, that would be some crazy rocks.
But I can give you the average T3 rock size volume for those sites will be about 350,000. That's average. So I'm looking at all the sites, and all the sites are slightly different too. So just keep that in mind as well as I grab an average. Like we're gonna have some sites that are balanced slightly different than others for a variety of reasons. But yeah, 350,000 is the average rock size for the T3 sites.
Hey, listen, those numbers are making people happy immediately in the chat.
Yes,
it's making chat respond well. I'm looking at the nervous look on Convict's face. It's a good stream.
No.
Convict, do feel free to pick out if you think we've missed something in the chat that you think would be a good one to talk about as well.
Sure.
But yeah, okay.
I think Convict find it's the other designers who are balancing this stuff right now that might be sweating. But I think we're pretty. Yeah.
Listen, you've scored a goal. Everybody's cheering in the stands. What else can you give us about? I imagine, both of you, I bet a bunch of devs, but you two, especially being on community and being in such control that you are, you must get a lot of questions just straight up DM to you of things that people are asking you, right?
I have a question.
Redline?
I have a question.
Redline has a question.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt. But
that's right.
So in the dev blog, you mentioned specifically where you're not touching the newer nullsec ores. Is there like a time frame where you are looking to touch those, or is that too much?
That's a good question. So specifically, I think I was talking about density of those ores more than anything else, as well as things like refinement rates and everything else. It's a possibility. Like nothing is off the table. I think really this is where we wanted to start first, and we'll watch how things go. We'll watch where the MPI goes. We'll watch how people respond to these changes. So it's not so much of like a timeline thing as like I'm going to be watching every 2 weeks here. We'll check in with the community. I'll give some updates on what I'm seeing. We'll have our MERs and Oz reports and things like that coming out too, and then every month we'll look at what we need to like tune and tweak. So is it a possibility that we change those things? It is. Do we want to? I don't want to start with those things first, I think is the answer.
For sure. All right, now this one I don't know if you'll be able to answer, but it is a question that I've seen a lot of people have.
Sure.
They would like to know how much the upgrade will use in terms of like power and workforce. The T3 mining
That's a good
upgrade.
question. I don't have. I cannot tell you that answer right now. Not because I don't want to. I'll tell you this week when I know. That's what I'll say. I'll put it on Discord. This is one that's still being kind of tweaked and tuned and having all those internal conversations and debates and everything else. And we'll get there shortly, and I will get you an answer. But I can't tell you that right now with confidence. So just watch this week. What I can say is it will be more than a T2 site for sure, because it's significantly bigger. How much more? I don't know yet.
Cool.
Okay, cool. Hey, listen, we've got a question that I'm going to need one of you guys, be it from CCP or for you, Redline, or Luke, to explain to me. Will mining escalations get longer durations need a lot of accounts or friends to finish them in time for most players now. So what's this guy talking about? I've never done a mining escalation. They've got a limited time that they're there, and these people can't mine it fast enough. What's up with this question?
Yeah, so effectively they have a limited time. I can't remember the exact time now, but effectively a lot of the issues come down to if you got one before you were about to sign off for the evening or anything else, you couldn't go back to it because they just despawn too quickly, unless you had a lot of people to go and mine it out pretty quickly, right? I believe there you go, 6 hours. That's the scenario they're talking about. So if you're kind of like EU time zone and you get one at, I don't know, like 00:00 Eve, you've kind of either got to commit to being up all through the night to mine it, or find a load of friends to do it, because it's just not long enough in that scenario.
Yeah, I think this is all really viable feedback and changes we'll look at in the future. There isn't going to be anything for March 12th, I don't believe. If I'm wrong, then surprise. But I hear this feedback a lot, and I think part of it is like the escalations feel good. People like them, and they just want to be able to do them. And so, the feedback is heard. And we've talked about it a lot internally. So that is a possibility for the future. I'd like to see more escalations as well.
I think I recall that specific thing being brought up at the CSM summit as well, and discussed quite a lot. So yeah, it's been put in front of CCP before, for sure.
Okay. So are you saying that it's in mind, but not necessarily in mind for this patch?
Yeah. So for March 12th, we're not going to see any changes there. For the future, totally in mind, and something that we're thinking about and deliberating on.
Okay. We do have some people asking questions about the respawn rate of anomalies. Obviously, you're looking to change the volumes available in here. But do you have any plans to change the respawn rates up or down, or how do you feel about that?
How do I feel about that? I think for this patch, there's not going to be any significant changes to respawn rates for now. There's been a lot of additions and us just trying to figure out more the or part of it. But in the future, I think a couple of changes can and will likely happen, which is definitely looking at both respawn rates and distributions. So we're having a small distribution change to how some of the sites work right now, which is great. But that change will also empower us to look at how the other spawn rates and distribution of the other sites works too. So again, March 12th, not changing anything there. Future, it's absolutely something we could look at. But I think it's going to take we're going to have to take a step back and look at, again, we made all these changes. Where are we at? What feels good, what doesn't feel good, what's not working, what's working for people, and distribution and spawn rates are definitely one of the levers we have to pull, to keep pulling on there.
Okay. If we go back to Discord briefly, a lot of people had a lot to say about your dev blog, but by far the most discussion occurred around Metanox. What kind of problems were you hearing from players about around Metanox?
What were we hearing from players around Metanox?
Or indeed, what prompted you to talk about maybe addressing changes that may need to be made to Metanox in your dev blog?
Yeah, the first one was whether I should include that change in my dev blog or not. But I think with a little bit of CSM conversation and prompting, I decided to include it because it did impact the whole mining ecosystem. Metanox, I think, is fulfilling an interesting new role in EVE, which is allowing people to sort of passively create wealth, which sometimes means that people will be able to get to the activities they want to do more. And that's something I talked about earlier, which is what is the portion of time you are spending doing the work to get to the thing you want to do. And I think Metanox helps with that. But it's also had a lot of interesting and sometimes unintended side effects. It's had a larger impact on the Mungu market than maybe we anticipated. I think due to how we ended up balancing a lot of the Equinox resources around like reagents and stuff like that, it ended up coming out a lot cheaper than we thought it would, like to both run and own, and therefore a lot more people had them. That drove people out of things like manual mining, which had an impact on stuff like pyrite in the game. And so overall, like when we look back at where it is and how many there are versus like where we had hoped it to be, it is a lot more plentiful. So that said, I know that there's a lot of response around people saying like, oh no, but low sec, we loved it, and this was helping us, and a lot of stuff, and so to that I say, like, I hear you, and I think that there's a future for moon miners, there's a future for Metanox, that we can come and revisit these things, and that's a part of me in my dev blog also talking about, like, I want to look at other parts of space, not just nullsec. We need to get things kind of okay first, like they're a little bit shaky right now, so we'll get things okay, and then we can take a look at these other places a little bit more meaningfully. And I've heard other questions like, should wormholes get Metanox? Should HiSec have Metanox moon drills? Like all of these questions, and they're interesting. And I look at like, why do people want these things? Like, what is it doing for them? Why do they want it? And what's also healthy for the game in the long run. So I think this is just the first step, is more about health, and then the next step is about like addressing the game holistically and looking at all these spaces and saying like, what is the thing you need in your space to be successful that is also healthy for the game. Sorry, that was a little bit rambly, but
no, that's good. We want to hear. These people want to hear it. It's good stuff. Somebody had Nate's, thank you, has clarified something he said. He says Metanox passively mines moons, which previously were manually mined by players. Now the resources go to a select few instead of being ubiquitous to all. Now, I definitely have played Eve during this era. Convict, you'll have played Eve during the era of passive moons, yeah. And so for a lot of people viewing, a number of you will not have played Eve before the Citadel era, which is when this thing moved to manual mining. Redline? Oh, you played as well.
2018 and beyond. That's
damn, yeah. Okay, so Redline isn't aware of passive moons before that era, but to put it briefly, I mean, Okami, I'm sure you've heard this to some extent, but passive moon mining, on the face of it, sounds like, oh, what? There's no ships in space mining it. What's the point? What it really did back then was it made a fleet combat asset. It was an asset that was worth pulling in, but worth taking, worth fighting for, worth defending, worth attacking to take. It was a viable reason in space. It was an objective. It made your group money. It made your group money, not individual people, because it needed a group to defend it, right? And that's where I really see Metanox being now. They're trying to take that role as a tangible alliance level asset rather than something for people's personal income. Do you think that there's anything that you would want to do to try and further encourage that paradigm around them, it being an asset worth fighting for?
Yeah, I have a few thoughts, but Convict, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I think Metanox is already an asset for people to fight over. We've seen some great brawls come out of as a result of them. Like someone in chat said, it might have been Nate's, talking about how the 0.1% of alliances benefit from it. Well, I know some alliance leaders have said that Metanox's, particularly holdings in low sec, provide them with a stable source of income. So if they get kicked out of their space tomorrow, their entire alliance isn't going to fall apart because they'll still have some revenue streams for SRP and other services. Also, Metanoxes are less efficient than having Tatara or an Athanor on a moon, so you'll get only a proportion of the minerals that you'll get out of them versus actively mining for them after a frack. And the other consideration too is that, oh Jesus Christ, just slipped my mind.
You got this.
Yeah, no.
That's all right. Yeah. I got something if you want.
Damn it! No. There's one other really cool thing I was going to say that Metanoxes do. No, I've forgotten. I'll interrupt whoever's speaking as soon as it comes back to me.
You feel free to interrupt me, but something I was going to say that something that Nate said there. What he didn't say it was 0.1% of groups get to own it. He said 0.1% of people within the leadership of the alliance.
I beg your pardon. Yeah, all right.
Materials. Well, the key thing there
I knew what the intent was from what they said. I misspoke.
Well, the key thing there is, Nate, what I would say is that you are a real person, right? You're a human being. You're paying to play, in my mind, the best MMO in the world. If you don't trust your alliance leadership, you can go to another alliance where you do trust the people who do it. Don't let these people imply that they are offering the only place that you can possibly live in this game. This is part of the trust that the game should be asking of us much more, so that we can sow some division, so that we can have some drama, so that you can go and find the best place with the people you can trust.
To be fair, that was fairly similar to what I was about to say, right? Like, if your alliance is not allowing you to have those moons and you want those moons, either try and fight your alliance or just go to a different alliance. It's yes, I'm sure. Well, I know for bad logs there are alliances that have some of them, and some of those alliances are fairly public what they use them for. But all things are a balance, right? Alliances need your manpower, just like it's vice versa, right? Alliances don't really exist if there are no members in them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What I really think. Sorry, go on.
That's okay. I'll just jump in there real quick too. This is some like designy stuff. Is you guys are talking about things like trust, right? Like a lot of what is interesting in Eve is both like trust and how trust is built and how features may make or need or require people to trust each other to work. So something like a Metanox and these conversations that are happening. Like there is a social interaction that is required to make this successful. And while you were asking about things like botting and how do we avoid that stuff, we also think about this stuff too. It's like what kinds of like conversations are required to make this thing work. Like when an alliance owns this thing, will it create competition and therefore create conversation and create these moments of like trust building or breaking and stuff like that as well. So it's a part of Eve. It's a part of these features, and it's a part of how we think about designing the game.
I remembered what I was going to say. I was also just going to make the point that with Metanoxes, unlike refineries, it gives very sort of PvP orientated groups an opportunity to get some passive income by operating those things, because if they're stacked with PvPers and don't have many industrialists, they're not going to be able to do much mining anyway. And by having a Metanox in space that generates money for them, the only way someone is going to be able to come and take that from them is to try and blow it up, which is exactly the kind of thing that those groups want to get their hands into as well. So I just wanted to like say, I think overall the Metanox has sort of like helped to replace what's been missing since POSes kind of got like replaced, and we introduced the Athanor and the Rataru. The Athanor and the Tatara. The Rataru is an engineering complex, and it's just been a huge boon for the game.
Yeah. I mean, I will say, and I'm going to selfishly take a small amount of credit for these things eventually existing. But in 2020 on CSM 15. I pushed hard and I presented and I talked to people privately and I talked to people in meetings to help them to understand that with the loss of passive moons, we had lost a fleet combat focal point in the game, and we had lost an income method for PvP first groups. And I'm really happy to see Metanoxes be here. Some people in chat have said no one's fighting over them. I'd say maybe you need to fly a few jumps and look at the Z Killboard a bit more, because people have had small fleet fights over them. People have had Trillionisk dread brawls over them. And these events simply would not have happened over... did we say Reitaru?
You better say it that time.
Yeah,
Athanos and Tataris.
I was thinking, Athanos, Reitaru.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah, I've put that seed in your mind. Now you'll say it wrong every time.
Thank you. Thank you for accepting that it's your fault.
Yeah, I'll take that. I'll take that on me. I'll just add though that as great as I think the Metnox is, obviously it has changed the complexion of sort of certain gathering of minerals and resources in the game, and that's had some downstream effects which people like CCP Okami and the other designers on the team now have to deal with. But just saying there's this one issue with Metnoxes, and then going Guru Metnox, whilst ignoring all of the other really, really cool effects that its presence in the game has had, is probably not the best approach. Let's see if we can keep all those really cool things and then just sort of fiddle around the edges to fix up the other issue, because I think Eve's much better place with them, and not Metnox specifically, but like what the Metnox does. I think it's much better with that as a conflict driver. In my opinion, primarily to me, I think of a Metanox as a conflict driver rather than a resource extractor. But other people are going to look at that differently. But that's just kind of what makes them so cool, right?
Well, and this is a part of like the future of moon mining and content like this, right? Content like the Metanox or Skyhooks or whatever, like things in space to fight over. We can constantly keep coming back to these and saying like, where are these in terms of the value of wanting to fight over this thing? Like, what is driving people to fight over it? And like, is there more we can do there? Is there like another lever we could pull or something, an activity or whatever that can drive people here? And there is this like intricate Rube Goldberg machine of events here as well, which is, if we are increasing now the cost of them, the value of the magmatic gas goes up, and that now creates more value in having conflict over skyhooks and things like that as well.
Speaking of increasing prices of specialist materials, we've got a question here in the chat. It says, are you happy with the material composition of ships currently in terms of how much the value of each type of material, minerals, gas, PI, going into ships? And I detect perhaps sort of additional question in here that is along the lines of, a lot of people find a lot of ships too expensive at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
Aside from potentially increasing the amount of minerals coming into the game, is there anything else you want to look at? Do you want to try and reduce the price of ships?
Yeah, that's a great question. So am I happy with it? Like, sure, I'm happy with it. It's fine. But at the same time, there's the better answer is like, what are people not getting out there? Like, what do people want to get out there, and what are they just like not, because it's just not worth it on like the grand scheme, like making this thing, buying this thing, losing this thing, it's just not worth it. There are ships that are probably too expensive in general for what they are, and we need to look at those. And in fact, I'm going to give you guys a little teaser here. We're almost done. In fact, some ship prices might be changing on March 12th. But I'm not going to tell you what they are today. We might go into that a little bit later this week. So just teasing that.
Well, I mean, can you tell like some of your favorite people privately so that we can capitalize on this on the market?
That is disrespectful.
Yeah. I mean, speculate all you want. But I think this is where we get wonderful feedback from our friends on the CSM, and just listening to people and looking at material prices of like the material makeup of ships is a good place for us to just adjust things to make sure that prices are at an equitable place, to make sure that these things, like, people want to get them up there in space and do things with them. We've got a lot of ships, and it's hard to make that happen because there's so many ships in this game. But it is something that we do consider. So yeah.
Okay.
Well, I've got a way to completely change Well, I've got a way to completely change the topic because I wanted to ask about something that you love talking about and that I hate talking about. So it's surprising that I'm going to be the one to ask
Please
it.
no. Please no.
It's
I'm
so relevant, Luke. It's so relevant.
Look, we're talking about ships, we're talking about rorquals in space, these fun things. People also want to know what we're thinking about doing with projection.
Here we go.
What kind of issues you're tracking and what kind of hopeful things you're looking at fixing or changing. They're looking for secrets. I'll be honest, it's me. I'm looking for secrets. It's me.
March 12th, we're just going to delete all the ansiblexes. Let's go. That's it. They're gone.
Now we know.
Do you know what? I'll take it. I'll take it.
Yeah.
I've been on this. I've been on this for eventually coming up to 5 years. I'm really hoping that whatever does change actually changes the paradigm around projection, because something I do know, and this links into what you were saying earlier about pulling levers and then looking and then pulling the lever and then looking and then pulling the lever a bit.
Mm-hmm.
You're using a different set of phrases around what historically has been a dreaded phrase around CCP, and that is iteration. Now, 100% of major changes to the game have come with the promise of, and if it hasn't worked or it's too harsh or it's not enough, we will iterate upon it. And the overwhelming majority of those have then come with no meaningful iteration afterwards. When we look at projection, I very much feel that if you kind of don't get it right the first time, it's going to be another 7 years until it's looked at again.
Yeah,
are there
so
any sort of kind words around projection with that?
I'll tell you what, this is a really, really tough one to solve. I'll be honest with you guys, and because there are people in every different camp of this problem. I think I'll be maybe a little open here with that. I think some of our original design intentions with Equinox were meant to address it more than we did, and through a lot of discussion, debate, and various things, I think we tried to sledgehammer that problem. And what kind of came out of that conversation, and I know you were there for it too, Luke, was there are many problems. Like there are some obvious ones that like Ansiblix as they are and in their numbers directly contribute to. But there are many problems like small things, big things like Pushfin filaments, things like Zarzak that all like previously Zarzak that contributed to this concept of force projection. And we have like a huge laundry list of all of these things now, and we're trying to like just iterate at them. And this is one that I don't think like we can sledgehammer. I actually don't think there is like we just one and done this thing and everybody's happy and it's all good. I think that either we do that and we make a lot of people unhappy, and like a lot of other people happy. I don't know, but I do see a path to this, us fixing this slowly and over time, and maybe that's not what you hope for, but I think it's the right way to fix this problem, because it is complex, and there are a lot of people in different camps of this one as well. So with that in mind, we will have some more projection changes coming shortly, and there is a future where we are contemplating things directly like the Ansiblex and the role of the Ansiblex, and whether there are alternative ways of allowing people to kind of customize the roadways in their space as we think about it for different utilities, right? Like I think one is like I'm just a guy in my space and I want to get around and do the things that I do, and this is really convenient for me. And then the other is force projection. We can just jump over there and punch you in the face very quickly. And how can we separate these functions a little bit more cleanly than just one does all?
Do you feel that if a group, if a large group wants to be at full force in a location in the game, in this constellation, on the edge of this region, do you think that to be efficient, they should have to go and live there?
I worry you might be throwing a really difficult question for a
you
to answer there
listen, Luke?
without really
can I say
things.
You know what I'm getting at, Luke? Do you
I know
want
exactly
to
what
ask
you're
it in
getting
what
at.
might be a fairer manner?
Well, I think the chat. I'm kind of just jumping in, right? Because I think it's one of those awkward questions to ask, which effectively is, should you be able to live at the center of a sprawling empire and travel from one side to the other side pretty quickly to have influence on that other side of the empire, or should the location where you are staged be important? So should you have to go and stage somewhere to project out from that? I just think it might also be a really difficult question to actually answer without.
Yeah, I mean, sure. In that framing, I think yes, strategy matters. Strategy should matter, right? Like I think when you don't have to think about where you are locating your forces, where you're building them up, and where you're placing them, when you have so much flexibility, and so much scale. Like I think that's one of the things that like the original intentions, if I go back to Equinox 2, was to think about how empires scale. That should matter, like where you are, how you are strategizing, where you're placing your forces, and where you want them to be responsive. So, yeah, I think so. I think where you are in space and matters. Should that be your home? I don't know if that's the question, but the strategic
home is a sort of
a loose term.
It's a loose term.
What you're asking is, should people deploy to be able to make any effective advances against an enemy's space? Like, should you be able to do that from halfway across the galaxy, basically?
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. No, I think so. Yeah, there is one humble game designer's take on it, which is yes. No. I think that like this is just an opinion that requires a lot of discussion here, but I really don't think that feels correct. I think that there's more strategy and nuance that should be applied there than currently is.
And this is kind of, Luke, I'm going to try and see if I can get a bit of a response from you in this, but I feel I don't have a problem with 10,000 people coming and shooting me in my one ship. I just feel like if you want to have influence on that area that I strayed into, I feel like you should kind of live there rather than commute there.
So I mean, we've discussed my opinions on my humble opinions on some of this stuff quite a few times, right? So I think there's two sides to this. I think there is a let's call it a tantrum radius from your home where you should have advantage because it is your home, right? You've put the infrastructure there. You should have that mobility in that space. I know not everybody agrees with that, but I do agree that there is a limit to how far you should be able to kind of put your claw out and influence things without putting in strategy to do that, whether that's deploying there or whatever that's going to be, right? Like there should be a distance. I think the balancing act is always how far is that distance? How does that interact with, is that distance for antiplexes, or how does that interact with other projection mechanisms? I think that's the challenge there.
Okay.
But I think we've discussed this one at least 10 shows. I think my opinion is quite well known on it.
And my opinion is really well known too, right? I'm the polar opposite of you, Phantomite. I think more projection is great. I want to be in a group of 10,000 people going to everybody's doorstep every day of the week. I understand that that's bad, but like it's also a player psychology problem as well. Because there is an opinion in the chat that says, excuse my language here, do not fuck with projection. Making it harder to move is going to reduce the amount of conflicts and fights, which is what the vast majority of people play this game for. So, I mean, that is true.
I would argue, and you two guys, Okami and Convict, I would argue that again is a player's personal choice. Let's imagine that you guys messed with projection and made this guy mad, right? He could no longer project to get his content. And that's true.
Let's not imagine at all. Let's use my personal experience, because when Zarzak first came out, I was galaxy hopping in my little frigate or whatever.
Yeah, but you're just
going
wrong.
from place
you're just
to
wrong,
place.
Redline.
I'm just one guy, right? And there
wrong.
are a lot of people that are just one guy like me, or maybe 5 people that want to go anywhere very quickly and not spend a lot of time traveling through space that is, for lack of a better word, empty, right? So if you can just go straight to where the content is, that's great. Unfortunately, if 5 people can go straight to where the content is, then so can 500 in a lot of cases, and that's where things get difficult. I think that there's a balance there, right?
Yep. Yeah, and this is what makes it really tricky, right? Like, because you're right. You just a little guy. You just want to get to your content and go do stuff and go fight people and have fun, and you don't want to have to travel for hours to do that. Like, that makes sense. That makes sense to me. But also like some of the problems that come along with projection, especially when it comes to like newer corps and alliances trying to break into space and the things that they have to deal with that. Like those are challenges that exist in the game, and this is why taking a sledgehammer to this isn't the right answer.
No, but the way that I see it, the groups that exist in nullsec are only as large as they are because they can affect such a large volume of space very quickly.
I don't think that's true.
Well, I think it very much is. I'll explain. If you had to live closer to the edge of your space to be able to affect the edge of your space, the edge of your space, where your enemies are, then you are leaving the other side of your space vulnerable because you can't get there quickly. Or you could break your large group up into smaller subgroups and position them on the edges. And that way you're covering all the edges by deploying at both ends, But now you're half the size. And you've essentially just reduced the amount of force, or you've reduced the amount of space. People get to choose. We had that message saying if you mess with projection, people won't be able to get to their content anymore. I view that as that's your choice. You could instead choose to go and live closer to the content. Sure, it's more dangerous because you're now closer to your enemies. They're closer to where you live. But isn't that the point? Isn't that the war driver in this game? Isn't that the driver to make you want to come and defend?
Well, I don't think people want to be at war every day, and they don't want to perform the actions of being at war every day, because they're a lot different than just your regular day-to-day playing. So, for instance, I'm in what you'd call a smaller nullsec alliance, the Mighty Test Alliance. Please ignore. Thank you very much. And if I want
healthy and strong,
and if I want to go rat or something, I'm just gonna go rat in the testagram, right? I'm gonna spin an Ishtar for a while or something like that. And if I'm gonna go PvP, I'm gonna go out to somewhere completely far away and random. But I'm in my alliance because I have a safe-ish space to crab in. And I feel like that's why people join the big alliances, is because there's safety in numbers. But you're never going to be able to change
that big space then. Live deep and send your PvP first guys to the edge.
Well, that's the thing, is the PvP guys, they're in the same place as I am because they're waiting for people to come and try to attack me. Like, there's no reason to go to the edge right now. There's nothing out there. That's the dead space that people have to travel through. That's what I was talking about.
There would be people at the edge if you were asking people who wanted to fight each other to live closer to each other.
I don't have anything for
Anyway,
that.
Yeah.
this is the cyclical debate, and probably one worth, unless there's specific questions about it from the audience, it's probably one worth bringing to a close because it will go on ad infinitum.
That is true. That is true. Fair point. Fair point indeed.
I tell you what, from the type of people in the game that I represent, which is very different to the type of people that Redline represents in the game, I'm very excited at the potential of whatever they may be changes to projection, because I think that done correctly, it has the potential to break up the biggest groups in the game into smaller groups that are now better positioned to fight each other. And in the past, before the Citadel era, before the Anseblex era, the Sov map was a much more fractured puzzle of different groups. Yeah, some of them aligned with each other, but people had opportunities to forge out and create their own stories that I just don't think is possible with the current meta. And I lay that almost entirely at the feet of the projection ability in the game. Perhaps with a nerfed projection, there could be increases in the rewards for PvE given the increased risk in the game. I'm sure that these are all levers that you might want to pull for this, but I know that what a lot of people are waiting for to come back is achievable, realistic war in this game, rather than just border skirmishes where nobody really tries to unseat each other. And I really hope that that's something that you can figure out a way to re-encourage in this game again.
So too. I mean, that's what a lot of people are here for is epic space battles, and something we talk a lot about internally. And yeah, projection's a piece of that puzzle.
That's great. You two guys, I'm sure that you get DMs from people, not just Reddit threads, not just people typing in the mining channel. I'm sure you get people contacting you directly with their complaints about, well, everything. But regarding mining, are there any particular messages that you hear repeatedly from them before we start to wrap it up for the evening?
I normally don't get messages from miners about specific issues to do with mining. More generally, I get the messages where people are going, "Oh boy, that mineral price index," and those kinds of things, sort of more like macroeconomic things rather than sort of like ground level at the coalface kind of mining issues. Of course, I'm thoroughly unqualified to answer those questions as well. So I just sort of like kick them up the chain, in Slack or what have you.
Yeah.
Fix it, Greg. Ugh. Let's see. So I'm just looking through a few of my DMs and things here, and there's a lot. So the first one, I think, when it came to a lot of this is like, but what about low sec? What about wormhole space? What about everywhere else? Yeah, totally. I think there's a ton of questions. I got like lots of questions, lots of feedback about other places in space when it came to mining. Totally, there's a ton of ideas cooking internally already. We care about the game. We made some changes in one part of space, and they're not quite where we need them to be. And I think it's just like we need to, like, when there's feedback around, you never follow up, you never finish or whatever. Like we're doing that. We're trying to finish. We're trying to finish.
This is the iteration that Phantom alluded to before, right? It's like the fact that Equinox came along 9 months ago now. I think it was June or July last year. I can't recall the exact date, but there was a lot of patches all the way leading up to Revenant, which were all touching on Equinox related things, and still working on it now. I'm sorry to interrupt you, Okami. I'll let you finish your thought.
No, it's all good. So yes, this is a part of iteration. It's a part of us making sure that like the ecosystem as like at a whole is just kind of stable. Not everybody's going to be happy with every change, and not everybody's going to be like we just expect that. But once things are kind of stable, that's when we can start looking around at all these other spaces. And I'll also just shout out to this year's CSM too. It's really, really like well balanced. So I've got people I'm talking to about like wormhole space, and I'm talking to people about lowsec, and it's excellent. So I'm like arming myself with a lot of good like information, and thinking about how holistically the rest of New Eden needs to get sort of some love when it comes to things like mining or other stuff. So that was a big one. A couple other ones, like I get a lot of feedback on ships in general. Like of course Rorqual, put Rorqual aside, I've heard like a lot about Orca. There's been a lot of Orca debate. I don't quite know what I want to do with that yet. I'll just be honest with you. I think I have to process that one a little, but like a lot of passion for the Orca for whatever reason, which is great. And just ships in general, whether like mining or otherwise. But there's been a lot of questions and feedback about just ships. Can more mining ships? Can more modules? More different things to do with mining? Are we missing a mining ship somewhere in the grade of things? Maybe, I don't know. So a lot of topics like that coming into my inbox.
Oh, apparently we're missing a mining dreadnought with a Vorton mining laser, based on some discussion in Twitch chat earlier tonight. Could be interesting.
Yes, sir.
Yes, so.
An
So,
Edencom
hey,
mining
listen.
dread, by the way. There you go.
There are not just more questions, but there are 5 times as many individual mining topics that people would love to hear more about. Are either of you guys going to be appearing anywhere else in the near future where people can also tune in again and try and pepper questions for the info that they desire?
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, Discord's the place I like to be. So I'll be in Discord if you like to catch up and chat. Come to the mining channel. I'm in there right now because mining's the thing I'm working on and thinking about the most. So come find me there. I'll probably be on some upcoming streams as well. Talking Stations next week is going to be one of them. So have a look there. Reach out to me if you have any questions or thoughts. And then beyond next week, my brain doesn't know. Other than that, probably FanFest. So if you're coming to FanFest, come find me, come say hi, tell me all the things you love about mining there as well.
Excellent, wonderful. Well, I'll tell you what. If we go around the room for any final thoughts, be they 1 second or many seconds long, Convict, how do you feel we've kind of served the players this evening who are crying out for more info?
Well, hopefully a couple of the hard facts that Okami dropped in terms of all volumes and things like that will be received well, and keep people sort of happy until we get into the update itself. There's obviously going to be more to that update, and not just mining stuff either. Sorry to be a tease, but like Okami says, they're still crossing the T's and dotting the lowercase J's. So when we'll see what the final package is, and you'll be able to get that in the patch notes when it arrives. Mostly, I'm just sort of, when Redline before mentioned the testagram, my mind went Pentagoon. And the eternal debate over what is the true location of that, the name of that constellation up in Declan.
I think we just look at the SOV map and let that decide right now.
I think it boils down to who was living there the first time you saw that on Dotland and went, oh, that's a really cool little cluster of solar systems.
Luke, how would you send everybody off today?
I mean, I think it's very similar to the conversation that we had at the end of the CSM Summit wrap-up one, right? Which I think, there's some information that's been put out. That's great. I think also people should just take away that, some of these big topics that are causing fractious points and stress points are actually being looked at. These things don't go into a black hole. But as Okami said, some of these things are also incredibly hard to unpick without doing major damage to the game in the process. I know that's frustrating for some people, especially on Reddit. But I think it's good to hear that it is happening.
If I come to you in a sec, I'm not going to come to me after you. I want to give you a chance to kind of maybe respond. But from the deepest place in my heart, from the deepest place in a huge number of players in the game and players who would love to come back to the game, really happy to hear that you're on board with more war in Eve. I might say as a piece of guidance that the CSM will be able to talk in more detail on is we really desperately need actual war to be achievable through affording ships and maybe the horrible grind that Sov currently is. We need that to be more viable in this game so that we can start to write some fresh stories rather than have forever empires in this game. I mean, how might you send us out tonight?
Yeah, I mean, I guess if at least one empire doesn't fall under my watch, then something's amiss. I want to be here for it. But absolutely, I think like everything you guys have said are real topics that we talk about frequently, both in design with the CSM and like with the community at large. I think the one thing I'll say is like I'm here to be a champion for the players. That's my role as a designer, and that's you guys, right? And I in this dev blog coming out and all of this, I hope you guys can see like I'm trying to make an extreme effort here to both be communicative and transparent with like what's going on and how we're thinking about things. Whether you agree with them or not, at least you can understand what we're thinking. And I like to receive that back. So when you guys tell me like how much you like war means to you and what passion you have for it, like I listen. I take notes of all these things. If you give me a stupid idea that you think is bad, I will write it down somewhere and I'll think about it because every idea matters and might spark something interesting. So the big one for me is like I'm here. I really want to connect with the community, and just keep trying to make this game live as long as it can and do the things we all want it to do.
Can I be a bastard and like steal another minute? I have another closing remark because I actually want to add on to something Conway was talking about, and that is the terms of the communication that we've had. I thought his blog was excellent when he said that he was going to be writing this blog. It would be in his voice, and he'd be providing as much detail as possible. It was really welcomed by us and the community team for sure. And hopefully you've also noticed recently with the Eve Evolved ones, the dev blogs we put out, they were written by the dev who works on ESI, the technical director of EVE Online, and those kinds of things. And when CCP Okami says we're not always going to say the exact thing that you want to hear at the time, when it comes to providing feedback either directly to CCP or on public platforms, like Reddit and Discord and things like that, try not to conflate that with the part the news you're not entirely happy with the medium, because we're listening and watching very closely to see how this goes, this kind of approach. And it would be too bad if the feedback was delivered in such a way to make us think that maybe this approach isn't the right way to go. So I guess what I'm asking for is just like a little bit of deference, and if there's, and just to keep things at a easily digestible tone and fair when people are talking about it out in the public, because I think this is a fantastic approach and we want to keep doing it. But it's sort of incumbent on the community as well to sort of like meet us halfway when it comes to sort of how they respond to some of the things that we're saying this way.
Thank you. Hey, listen, thank you to you both for coming and helping everybody out around this. Thank you to the viewers for bearing with me, somebody who is not a miner, going through this. And I think Redline, you're gonna take us to the close.
Absolutely. I'm gonna close this out. We're gonna rate a friend, but first I wanna thank our CCP friends Convict and Okami for coming on. Appreciate having you. It's been a pleasure. And of course, thanks everybody for watching, and we'll see you next week. Same place, same time for another riveting episode of Untethered. And now we're gonna raid Frippy UK. So when you get there, you gotta say hi to him, put all the purple hearts in the chat, do those normal things that we do when we raid the streamers here. And we'll see you next week. Unless there's anything else anybody wants to say. You got like 30 seconds. 30 whole seconds.
30 whole seconds.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks very much, everybody. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. Well, I guess we just wave. We just wave and say bye. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.